Item under new business is council rules update. This is something that you wanted to bring forth to the council, Councilor O'Hearn. So would you like to lead the discussion?
Well, I can pick up from last meeting. I don't think it's currently working under the council rules. I think it needs to be a joint effort of the city manager and the mayor deciding the agenda. Things don't get on the agenda or things are prioritized as being I guess what it is. For example, I mean, I give, the last meeting, council rule discussion was last on the agenda, and council rule update is now last on the agenda tonight. I don't know why, it has to be. It should have been a little bit higher up there, but I'm just getting the feeling that the agenda gets put on there, and if it's something like this, it's either last. So throw it out to the rest of the council.
Responses from the council?
So,
Look here.
just to clarify, is this your rule change for the agenda?
Yes.
This is
Okay.
rule number 23,
23, okay.
believe was something that we instituted.
Yes. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify. So the only thing that I wanted to say on this is, I agree. I think that it's difficult if you leave it the way it is or you change it. I think they're both good in their own ways. The way it currently is worded, I think, is worded for the assumption that you are going to be collaborative, but should there ever be a disagreement, there has to be one person who has the final say. Whereas the proposed new reading would be clearly stating there should be a mutual agreement. But then if there isn't one, it leaves it very vague onto, okay, who makes the final decision or where does that go from there? So I guess erring on the side of caution, I would want to keep it as it is, just because, or at least do a hybrid of the two, saying, there's a understanding that there will be a mutually agreed upon agenda, but if disagreement occurs, the authority rests with the mayor, because I think there needs to be some wording in there that says if you don't agree, there has to be someone who makes the decision, but that we should be collaborating.
Other
Sorry,
thoughts?
that's a lot of words.
I would believe that two people can make a decision and mutually agree upon. The city manager has, what he's focusing on as the day-to-day operator, and the mayor is focusing on what she is doing as part of the council. And I think those two people can collaborate and come to a mutually agreed upon agenda. What I have been seeing, and since the year or whatever I've been on the council, is that again, like last year, I asked for some things to be put on the agenda. To this date, it has not happened. I've been told that there's a list and we're going through it. Well, I don't know where my request went because apparently it's not coming forth. We're already into 2019, and I asked that way back in the beginning that we have a discussion on how councilors be appointed to the boards and committees, and that still hasn't come up. It was on the agenda, to discuss the process of appointing boards and committee members, which I think was Councilor Pope. Maybe I'm wrong.
Part of that.
So this is the problem I'm seeing. Is like there are certain things that get on the agenda, and there's certain things that don't. And I think
that's a problem with the process of who sets it, or the person who's in the position.
Well, the person that sets the agenda is the mayor.
I know, but I'm just saying, are we placing blame on the wrong thing, is my question. I don't know if it's necessarily the process is all I'm saying.
Well, I remember when we first came up with this, I raised the concern then, and it was sort of addressed, and it wasn't you, Madam Mayor. I remember discussing the fact of you could be, and Bernie Folta brought this up as well. It's like whoever is seated in that chair could be very heavy-handed as far as how the agenda goes, and they could just do what they want, regardless of city manager feedback or not. And we were assured that wouldn't happen. I don't think that this specific language actually fixes anything. I don't know how to fix it. I do think it needs to be changed a little. I do like the fact that it references the city manager a little more in it, but there's still the problem of who's the final decision maker. I don't have any issue with if the manager wanted something added to the agenda, that should be able to happen without it being pulled off from the agenda. I don't know that that's ever happened. I'll just be clear on that. But I think that if the manager in his job felt that something needed to come before us and the mayor, not you, anybody, could say, nope, not talking about it. I don't personally, doesn't matter to me if we hit 10 o'clock. I know everybody hates that, but we also we could move it again to another meeting. But it's published.
So let's, Councilor Wilson.
I think the point here is just who sets that agenda, okay? What's on it or whatever. I have to deal with the board, okay? I meet with the director of the board director. We do the agenda, and we're pretty good. She can finish it whatever she wants. I've got my opinion, she's got hers. Maybe at the last minute, 1 hour before our board meeting, something happens. She doesn't tell me she doesn't have time. So what? As long as we've got an agenda, we've done the best we can. Because the issue here is who puts it on, not what is put on. The way I'm trying to simplify it. Hard to explain. But I would leave it just you, the mayor, gets the final word. That's it. Because I've got an experience similar, and that's the way it has to be.
Councilor Stowe?
I would go along with Councilor O'Hearn's recommendation. And the reason for that is if it becomes problematic between the mayor and the city manager, since each person has their inherent roles that they're going to try to get on the agenda. City manager's office has operational needs that it needs to be on the agenda. The mayor has policies and operational needs as well that needs to be on the agenda. If it becomes an issue where there's an argument there, only one of those people are an employee, and they can come back to the whole council if we need to address. So the council as a whole could address the issue since there is an employee versus the mayor who was elected and a councilor as well.
Okay, let me go to Councilor Zullo.
It sounds to me like the issue isn't with who sets the agenda. It sounds to me like the issue is what's getting put on the agenda. Is there a certain format of how we decide what gets put on the agenda? Or is there a list of things that are going to go on the agenda? Is there
So I think I reviewed this last time, but I'll go over it again. So what happens is during future agenda items and directive, that's what I key on. I mean,
Right.
What's going to be on the agenda. But when we meet, for instance, like tonight, usually the agenda is pretty much full for the next meeting. So that if councilors want something on the next agenda, already that agenda's been published.
right?
So, and if there's no time, then, we have to put it on, unless there's a burning reason why it has to be
On next week's agenda.
on the next meeting's agenda. Now, we have two ways, I keep a list and so does the council clerk through the minutes. And I'm not saying things don't fall through the cracks, sometimes they can. It is also, we could improve that by, I could send out to the council, this is the list I have. I'm not saying that it's going to be on the next agenda because I don't know what the city manager is going to come with as far as, his agenda request. I'm open for if there are any necessary improvements, but I can tell you that, yes, in a perfect world, the city manager and mayor would sit down and everything would be agreeable the first time through. But at the end of the day, according to the legal counsel that I referred to back in the last meeting, the mayor clearly resides over the meeting, and the final, as far as agenda setting, the final authority should rest with him or her. Mr. McLean, you wanted to add something?
So, I would just simply say to you that it is a collaborative process, and it's already pretty well defined in your charter that the city manager will speak to the council, be provided that opportunity so that the day-to-day operations of the city can be conducted properly. So it should not really be an issue. The fact that the manager is not a member of city council, but as Councilor Stone pointed out, is your employee, your one direct employee, serves at your pleasure. That person needs to understand that, and I do. And that, so I can't even imagine an argument with the mayor or a member of council with respect to what goes on the agenda. As Councilor Stone pointed out, and I think others as well, policy items are the province of the council. And in the event that the mayor, who acting on behalf of the council during an agenda review session, were not to put up an issue for the manager would have to speak at the next meeting, and the council, the full majority of the council, is always the arbitrator relative to a question of what should be on the agenda. I can't think of a worse thing to happen to the city manager and the mayor, though, that we have to come to the council to break ties. I just can't even contemplate what that would be. So I think the process will work in either way, whether it's Councilor O'Hearn's language or other language. It's going to work, and it needs to be collaborative, which I think many of you recognized. And then with respect to individual council members wanting things on the agenda, the council cannot be muzzled in that sense. I mean, the council, any member of the council who wants to have an agenda item placed on the agenda and feels that they want to have it done in a timely fashion and it's not happening for whatever reason, and I'm certainly not suggesting that there would be any hidden reasons, has the right to bring it up, as they would, and with a majority vote of the council, it can be placed on the agenda. So I think that all of these issues can actually ultimately be resolved by the majority of city council at any given time. But I'm thinking, in all the years I've been doing this, I've yet to see one argument where the manager, who is your employee, couldn't get along with the governing body and their representative, the mayor, relative to agenda.
You haven't seen that?
I haven't.
Because we have.
And, you know, I think that the manager just needs to be aware that who he or she worked for.
And the rule can be personality dependent. The rule should be providing clear guidance for whoever sits in these chairs from now until whenever. And, yes.
I think a lot of this, and I can't speak for Councilor O'Hearn, but I think a lot of this stems from the last meeting, and I sent an email out that everybody got, but concerns were, and they weren't my agenda items, but I clearly remember things asked at this meeting that really should have been, from a public perception standpoint, added to the agenda, and from just, they were asked at that meeting to be added, and I was under the impression they would be, and they weren't. I sent an email out to that effect. Also, I don't know how you correct this, but this one, I get a lot of feedback from people on this, and there are items that they just feel that are dragged out to the tail end of the meeting. And I can look at this agenda, and just based on the 10 years sitting here, like the stuff that people will actually come in and talk about at the podium and the stuff that they won't. And just getting a better read on that, I guess. But I get a lot of feedback on that where people are upset, and it turns into spillover online where, again, we talk about social media, but people complaining and it looks like it's hidden. It's not. It's not intentional, but getting it closer to the middle of the meeting to get feedback, which is very, very hard in this city. Even during budgets, but.
Councilor Kier.
Well, I know we've talked about this before, and I tend to agree that, yes, I would love these things to be sooner in the agenda, but then I think we've also talked about how the general reasoning for that is that if we look at all of these other things on our agenda, they had to do with department heads or the auditors here giving us a presentation, and we're trying to get those people off first so they can go home, so we're not either paying them or just keeping them here late on a salary that, that's not really fair of us. So I see both sides of it, but we also have to be cognizant of the other effects and reasons why it's in this order. I mean, yeah, it'd be great to have this earlier where people do want to talk about it, but we have actual people here that are waiting on these items that we have to pay to be here.
But it could be in a salary base. Most of those cases, and on top of that, the people that pay those salaries are the people that would speak to us. They're the same ones that are upset that
We
they
have
have to
some
get a
contract people
babysitter
who are
and come
not.
in at 9. That contract, I imagine, was one rate and not an hourly to come give the presentation.
I'm talking about the assessor.
So I can tell you the parameters I use as far as the item order. And I am always looking at the agenda with regard to, one, safety, because we have people that I know live outside of this community, 30, 40 minutes outside of this community, and I try to keep that in mind. I also try to keep in mind that when we have an agenda item that I know that people are going to be coming to either watch or speak about, I put that up front. There's never going to be a perfect way, and when we see a lot of people in the audience coming for a specific agenda item, well, then we make exceptions, which the council has approved, and that is in order to not keep people, if they would like to speak on an agenda item that's further along on the agenda, we have made that exception. So, and then they're able to speak during citizens forum. So maybe part of the discussion, not with this rule, because it really doesn't have anything to do with this rule, is how am I making the decisions I'm making, and maybe that is a different discussion than this current rule. This current rule is just about how does the manager and the mayor work together to set the agenda, and if there is a need to have someone make a final decision about a question, according to the charter, that resides with the mayor. And this rule was written to bring clarity to the process because there was no rule about this beforehand.
You got to remember, what's the time frame that you have to post this, like in the Eagle or somewhere?
2 weeks ahead.
2 weeks ahead. Well, a lot can happen with 2 weeks ahead, and that's the problem that she's having. How can you predict all this stuff when you don't know, and you got 2 weeks to decide it? That's the big issue, and that's always bothered me. You're doing okay, it's just the time frame that you have to correspond to, which doesn't make any sense.
Thank you.
Why is that? Is that a rule somewhere? If we could get rid of
Because
that? Yeah.
resolutions for sure,
And it's
maybe.
understandable, but that's a long time, and a lot of things could happen. And that's where the failure
Well, that's
is.
why we have revisions, too.
Yeah, right, exactly. So they got to understand that.
Councilor Pope?
You're never going to win on this one. I've sat there before, and no matter what, and you try your best on this. I don't know about changing the rule, but probably the only thing I could figure is that I basically had a parking lot of issues, and I'd say, here's what's been requested for the agenda so far. What's the council's pleasure? That's about the only thing I could do. At the end of that, I just kept a big list, and I'd say, okay, here's what we have that people want to put on the agenda. What's your pleasure for the next meeting? That's the only thing I could keep from.
So what I started last meeting was I wanted to have the council have a copy of the agenda for the next meeting. We would have done that today, but we had a hiccup because our council clerk is out on injury, so that kind of put a little
The
bit
city
of,
manager,
wrench into things. Councilor Kolaski?
I think the proper thing to do on this would be for somebody to make a motion second, and then we, one way or another, on this rule. I wasn't in favor of it as it was presented after I heard the city manager's explanation of it. I actually am in favor of it. I don't think it makes much difference at all. And there's still a mechanism to resolve the issue.
Okay. So there's some errors in that wording.
yeah.
So, Councilor Kolaski, do you want to, who's going to make the motion then?
I'll make the motion to move my recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay, so the motion was made by Councilor O'Hearn and seconded by Councilor Stone.
Yep.
Want a roll call? Yep.
Oh, hold on. Okay, I just want to see a cleaned up version of it, that's all, before we move forward on it, because
There's already a motion on the floor.
So on your discussion of the motion, then talk about it.
there's a motion, there's been a second. Yeah, I want to see a cleaned up version, because if we vote on this version now, we're stuck with the wording exactly as it is. Just want to make sure the wording's cleaned up. Bring it forward so we do it right. Been stuck on just one or two words in an ordinance being out of line, so. Do I agree with the general concept? Yes, I do.
So what do you want to change?
I don't know, maybe I'm reading this wrong. We'll come to a mutually agreement.
Yeah,
think that's
it should be
mutual.
mutual agreement
Yeah, that's what I mean.
on
I mean,
determining
Maybe we
together.
clean this up now in this motion, so we're
Take out the,
moving forward in the right way.
Huh?
That's all, I just want to make sure.
Any other
we're doing
changes?
this
it should be, both the mayor and city manager will come to a mutual agreement on determining the content of the agenda.
Okay, very
The
good.
is in the wrong spot, that's all.
Okay. Roll
Right.
call, please, Ms. Melcher. Roll call. Yep.
Are they,
I will
First and
accept the
second, okay.
changes on the motion.
Okay.
Councilor Lassard?
Yes.
Councilor O'Hearn?
Yes.
Councilor Stone?
Yes.
Assistant Mayor Dameron?
No.
Councilor Zulo?
Yes.
Councilor Kier?
No.
Councilor Klosky?
yes.
Councilor Pope?
Yes.
Mayor Lovett?
No. Yep. Okay, now we can move on. Any committee reports?